Well. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Write Your Narrative, a weekly podcast where we are discussing everything street art related happening in South Florida. I'm your host, Pascal D from Token of the World. This week, my guest is Cuban American artist Ivan Roque from Miami. I met and interviewed Ivan for the first time a little more than 10 years ago when he was painting his famous green virus character all over Wynwood. I had the chance to follow his incredible artistic journey from the FIU visual arts student he was to the well-recognized and established artist he is today. Well, we are here in North Miami in Ivan's Roque studio.
Welcome.
So thank you, Ivan, for being in the podcast. Thank you so much. I mean, we're going back to 2013 when I first met you, and we just watched a little video of the first interview that I did with you shortly after the show that you had, your first solo show that you had at the gallery in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, with the NAC gallery, it was it's crazy. Sometimes the cool thing about social media sometimes because it has like your memories recorded, and then just recently it was we're about in the anniversary of when the show happened, and then it started popping up, and I was there looking at myself, and I'm like, oh, kid,
yes, time flies. Flies.
Everything that's coming your way.
But you have done so much in 10 years plus. I mean, this is absolutely, your trajectory is absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
And all the different phases that you actually went through as an artist. You really started grinding with that very, very simple virus character in Wynwood. So what was the beginning? How did you get started with that one character? Is that by watching everybody around doing the one character versus graffiti? You never really did much in graffiti.
So, I never called myself a graffiti writer. I just have too much respect for graffiti to ever even admit that I did graffiti. I always called myself a street artist because, I would do characters, and it was specifically these viruses that I would paint around. Because I tried writing. I did try at first, and I was just bad at it, And then I related a little bit more with doing these little faces all over the place, and it was something that I could be like iconic at the same time, and do something that was kind of like true to my soul, And then I guess what I was going through at the time, and in that transitional phase from being a young teenager to like a young adult, and I think it all played well.
Yeah, especially being a teenager and getting your teeth out. It's just like,
yeah,
exactly. You want to grab, you want to choose something, and this is what you were. And then actually the virus was a way for you to spread your name around somehow. This is how it did happen.
Yeah, people, some people do remember it. From time to times, I will bring it back kind of like as a nostalgic piece, usually in the October months.
Yeah.
I'll bring it around then, and then I'll combine it with some of the new styles, and I'll just kind of throw it in there, just kind of an homage to that era of my life.
And this was a time in Wynwood where everything was almost free for all. I mean, you grew up in
Sundays were great.
Yes.
Sundays on Wynwood were always my favorite times. There was nobody there. There was no cops. You basically go, you do whatever you want, and nobody stopped us.
But anyway, Wynwood is moving along like us. We are moving along. You are moving to much greener pastures now, and now you have a signature work that everybody can recognize. So what was the transition between the virus and then after that? So this was your first solo show back in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you were still in school studying design.
I was going to AI at the time. And then, it was the Art Institute of Miami. Actually, they recently all closed down. The whole system completely collapsed. It really was a scam from the beginning. But growing up as a lot of children of immigrants and refugees, you're always taught like, oh, you go to college, doesn't matter what it is. That's your life is guaranteed. Life will change for you, and that's just sadly not what it was. You get me?
Yeah,
it's almost like our parents, in a way, believed in that too. And so I thought, okay, we do this and that, and then things will go in our favor. But then as you grow up, you start realizing the truth of the matter. Ultimately, I left there. I didn't go to school for a little bit, but I was so much in student loan debt that I was like, I might as well go finish my degree. And that's when I went back to MDC, and I went back to FIU, and I eventually finished at FIU, which I'm extremely grateful. You know, I always say I'm a proud Panther. You know, and they've given me a lot of opportunities too. So it's nice to see. You know, I actually have a mural at FIU at the stadium. So you know, it goes to show you how they support their alumni and the people that graduate from there.
So for the people who are listening to the podcast who don't really know you, you are a Cuban American.
Yes.
Say you're son of an immigrant. So
yeah,
this is something that it's always very, very present in your work.
Oh, definitely. Like, you know, it's those things there where, like, you know, in my mind, you know, especially at the beginning and when things got tough and all that, I always would think to myself, you know, because my mom was the one that like really was the one that supported my decisions to become an artist. You know, she had told me like, oh, you know, when I was thinking about pursuing art and people were like, no, you know, artists don't make money. You can't make a living off of that. You know, it's really hard. And then of course, you know, we were looking at the tremendous cost of what art school was. And then that was a downer. And I remember my mom was basically like, you know, she's a mail carrier. And, you know, so, you know, shout out to all the mail carriers out there for the jobs that they do, especially in this heat. You know, she goes to me, he's like, you know, I want you to go and do what you want to do what makes you happy, because at the end of the day, I don't want you waking up having regret in your life, you know, and what things could have been, you know, you pursue that passion. So, you know, I was very thankful for my mom because of that. And then, you know, when I look at my dad, you know, like I always tell myself, like, if he jumped on a raft to go 90 miles of water to get to America, I think I can try to become an artist, right? You know,
yeah, definitely.
It's not a life or death. It's not a life or death thing in a way. So, you know, you gotta just sometimes go for it.
What was the transition between the virus and that second solo show that you did?
Basically, I had various points from the virus to now. And prior to the virus, like in high school, I would do these little devil and angel characters. And, you know, the virus face basically came. It was like the devil's, like the little devil's eyes and mouth. And I just used that. And it was eventually, you know, basically were like jack-o'-lantern looking faces. And I used that to basically, you know, go with the viruses, and I did the whole virus and spread like a plague and all that. And then I started evolving, you know, and I started to like add that to my other work, and started adding collage work, you know, because like in school I was challenged and like, oh, how can you make some actual art of it? I started doing collage works, and I started painting on top. And then from then I started evolving. I got heavily influenced, especially by Anthony Lister and Typo's work at the time.
Yeah.
That's when you saw the second show, which was Think Happy Shit, which was at the You and I Are Love Gallery that was in Wynwood. And that right there, you know, it was extremely playful. I was very true to myself there, because when I did the Lost in Cinema solo show, you know, I did something where I thought like, oh, like this right here is something that it's nice and edgy, and I think it actually would work and people would buy into it, you know. So I was completely selling out in a way. So I painted for the wrong intentions. And mind you, I painted that whole show in a month. I painted 16 paintings in a month.
Did you sell any of those?
No. I didn't sell any.
Oh, well,
and I'll never forget, you know, I remember when I got home that night, you know, I didn't sell anything the opening night or the VIP collector's night. And I remember getting home and my mom looked at me and she's like, oh, everything okay? I'm like, yeah, everything's fine. And I went to sleep, and I basically cried that night. You know, it was really, you know, it was one of those, like, definitely a heavy lesson to learn. I kept on painting and I kept on, you know, and then I evolved my style, like I said, more into like the Anthony Lister and all that with illustrations. But there I was actually being more true to myself, you know,
yes.
Being true to who I was. And, you know, I was painting what was in me, but it was something that I could relate to better. And I have like my experiences and tell stories and all that. And it was a really vulgar show. It was a really graphic show. I didn't care. There, I told myself, don't ever paint for other people. Always paint for yourself. You know, paint to be true.
Absolutely.
Yes. And surprisingly, that show actually did pretty well. Like, you know, that one did sell pieces, and that style really worked well. And then, but the thing is with that style was that it was really difficult to translate into murals. I wasn't doing too much murals at the time. I would do some little murals there in pens, but like to transition that style to the other one was a little difficult. So, you know, and I always appreciated really, really high well technique and highly rendered you know, murals and whatnot. As time progressed, you know, I really started evolving, and I started like leaning more into the Miami culture and the color schemes, and like learning more on Miami history, and like and then like, like the Art Deco, and I started learning, like about, fashion and like Versace. And I remember I was seeing the assassination of Gianni Versace.
Oh my, yes, this was something in Miami.
Yeah, but it was a show that was done on FX. It was a whole series, and the whole series I was like, wow, look how beautiful it was done, and look how like like the lighting and all that, and how colorful yet how dark it could be. You get me? And I started switching. That's when I started switching my color schemes, and that's when the light blues and the pastels and the greens and the yellows and all that started coming into play. And I was doing more animals and more highly rendered pieces, and I really was liking the way this was coming out. And that's when I did the show, the museum show.
Yes.
I was in the transitional phase of the illustrative pieces to those painterly pieces that I was just talking about. And so when I did the illustrative piece, that right there was combining all my styles already with the collage works and this and that. Was very clean. It was very, it was highly conceptual, and to me that was one of my highest honors to this date. The way I got that solo show, I mean, it was like a live painting battle of like 2 or 3 rounds, and I mean, like, I went against some of the biggest names in South Florida, and I somehow was able to pull through that solo, and I was able to get that solo show, and I was working at the time. I was painting at the time at a storage unit. It was this super, super hot, like muggy place, and like it was gross. Now that place is my storage unit for all my mural stuff.
Oh, you still have it, yeah?
Yeah, I have to. I mean, I can't bring any of my mural stuff in here. I have literally cans. It was basically like my dungeon almost.
It was a dungeon, yes.
Yes, and it was really, really hot. I remember I think I was working the show in the middle of summer, and I had a little fan that's like rickety and like clack, 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 and like it was bad. It was bad. Anybody that went there, they're like, oh yeah, this place is a massive upgrade from that. So we did that, and then, but again, my color schemes were still dark and all that, and then that's when I said, like, I saw the assassination of Gianni Versace, and I did a solo show at the beach at one of the hotels. They invited me to do a solo show there. And I started playing with all these ideas, make a very Miami show that really illustrated a lot of the issues that I was seeing going on around the city. And I did it in a way where I was still symbolic with it. I was still conceptual with it, and it all tied in. It all tied in nicely. And I was like, okay, I like this. This is actually something that I can really relate to. And I saw also the reaction where people were like really gravitating to it as well. And so that worked for a while, and then but there was something there where people were questioning, like, oh, like, what's your, like, this is cool, but this is all technique. What's your style? I'm like, what's my style? What do they mean? What do people mean when they say, what's my style? And so I kept looking. And then one day, I remember I was painting at the Tortuga Music Festival, and I came up with this idea where, okay, I'm going to paint a fish with vines coming out of the gills, because I wanted to start adding more greenery to the work. And so I do that, and literally at 4 p.m., I finished the live painting, and I drove 15 hours to Tennessee to a mural festival, Burning Bridges in Chattanooga. And we get out there, and I didn't know what I was going to paint. And I'm there looking, and I'm like, oh man, what should I do? What should I paint? I'm like, I like that vine thing I did. Why don't I do that again? So I painted a snake with these golden vines and all that. And then that's when I did it. I'm there looking at it, and it hit me. I'm like, if I add vines to all the works that I do, it allows me to basically create and do whatever I want. But as long as I have these signature things to it, a particular color scheme, floral, animals, or whatever object, and these vines, the world opens up for me, and I can figure it out, and I start to explore what concepts I could do with these vines. And that's when I'm like, the vines are basically the connection between us all.
Yes, this was my question about the meaning of these vines. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. No. I'm like going already around.
That's totally fine. I mean, this is very, very captivating listening to your story. How you went from one phase to the other. So we skimmed slightly through the museum show that you did at the Coral Spring Museum, which was a milestone for you. So this was when you were into your darker period, kind of.
I was definitely in a darker period there. I was going through a heavy existential phase at the moment. Thinking into these thoughts. To be honest, I was experimenting with some psychedelics at the moment. So I think that kind of helped blur the lines a bit. don't do drugs, kids. It's not worth it. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I did that for a little bit, you know, and I think that's where I was trying to go in, because I was just more like, I was so involved with the evolution of things and how things are moving and things, you know, growing up. And then, you know, again, this whole thing of going from a teenager to, you know, because at the end of the day, you come to realize you're like, shit, you know, I'm this age now, you know, and I'm changing. You know, I see it to myself, you know, I'll tell you this, once I hit my 30s, you know, I got backaches and I got my knees start popping. I'm shit.
Yeah.
You know, we're you know, like time is flying by, and I think that's basically what I was trying to capture in a way. You know, I was trying to just capture like this fights with yourself and all that in that show, and that was a very powerful show.
Oh yes, I was there for the opening, and this was definitely something quite striking.
Thank you.
So from that show at the museum, and then a few years later, of course, you went into the Vine. But right before that, I remember the Golden Studio at the Mineral Styles, and this was the end of the day, and you painted that giant fish on the wall. And I remember, you said to me, "What should I do for the background?" That was the background thing that was kind of bothering you. You couldn't find something.
I had gotten a critique, an unwanted critique from the artist next to me. I'm not gonna say any names. You know, I was pissed at the moment, but I'm actually really thankful for that, because it really opened my eyes. You know, I was like, damn, what's wrong with it? What am I gonna do? And the whole night I was there, I was done like at mid-afternoon. And I was there till the nighttime, just breaking my neck, like pissed, like what do I do? How do I make this better? Like, how do I make this me?
I know the fish, to me, looking back at it, and I remember very, very clearly, I was questioning myself. So what is that fish doing with all this graffiti around it? I couldn't tie anything. I could not figure out what was your idea. I just wanted
to do a fish floating fish with like a bubble of space. It was like something there. I was trying to go for something, and it was flat. I remember one of the things that the dude told me was like, man, this fish looks like it's dead in the water, about to get flushed down the toilet. I'm like, shit, dude. Damn.
That's funny, because
I'm glad he said that to me.
For me to be to watch you evolve, this is part of that day, and this was one moment when I guess after that the Tortuga festival was maybe a week later or 2 weeks later, something
Probably.
So it was just like, okay, you had an idea, but you could not finish it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what art is about. I mean, it's hard to tell. And it's a question that very often I ask myself, and I ask the artist, when can you tell when a canvas is finished? How can you can always add more. You can always throw another color, throw another layer, throw another something.
1,000%.
But when, as an artist, you say, my canvas is done.
So in my opinion, it gets to the point where, you know, as you know, you look at something there. Of course, you could rework a piece as much as you want and all that. But I feel there's a point there where you're like, okay, I think this one has been worked too much, before you get to the point where you overwork it, and now you had something great, and then by trying to perfect it, you mess it up. Because the reality is, there is no such thing as perfection. You know, although, you know, like you know, there's artists that I know that in my eyes, when I look at their work, it's perfection. But I'm 1,000% sure that when they look at it, they see all the flaws and where it can be better, because they know what they want at as the final product. I know what I want as the final product. So for me, sometimes I'll be to a point where, okay, this is great. For the next one, I think I'll do this, and then I build upon.
You build upon, yeah.
I build upon it, especially for the next one. Okay, boom, boom. I know what to do next time. Because days you go back and you look at your pieces and all that, and that happens a lot with murals, especially.
Yeah, also.
Because, you know, with a lot of my murals, I go back and I look at them, you know, because sometimes I somehow am in the area, you know, like especially when I travel, and I'll be like, okay, I could have done this, and oh man, I remember, like, you know, this would have been done better because I now know how to do this. You get me? And things like that. But it's just a natural growth, and that's something that you know, you have to try to push yourself just a little bit further every single time. You know, I think that's the most key part. But going to your question, I don't think any piece is truly finished. I think you just have to know when to stop.
But as far as your painting and the transition to murals, what was your very first wall that you did as a real mural?
So the first mural I ever did, I'm gonna say as an assistant, because like the first actual mural experience. Because going and painting at a pennant or painting on the streets it's a whole different thing. I'm relying speed, accuracy, and I think doing that helps out with painting murals. As a spray paint artist, with the speed aspect of things. I remember a friend of mine at AI. He was like, "Oh yeah, I know this artist there that he's looking for an assistant to paint with a mural." So it was me and my friend Patrick. That he's like, he's a pretty known graphic designer in the city. We went to go help him out, and man, I was so scared. I was like on the second story of a scaffolding, and I was like, I was just shaking, and I was really terrified. I'm still terrified of heights, but now like you're more comfortable with certain heights, and so you get used to it. But yeah, that was like my first experience, and then my first actual like legal mural was actually in front of Win 317 Gallery in the old one. It was like a tribute to Banksy, where it was like a rat spraying spray can with green and all that. And then that was still like in that whole dark era.
Yes,
yes. That was it.
Yes, you had that whole period with the little rats. And I have to say that I'm very proud to own one of your pieces with the little rat with the cubs and the virus piece. So this was something that I had from your studio. And actually, yes, from that piece, I also own your very first NFT.
Yeah, you do own the NFT, and that was the more conceptual works. That right there was definitely something that was really cool. It was a fun time, man. I gotta admit, it was definitely a fun time.
Yeah, those NFTs was I don't know, are they still around?
I mean, they're around, man.
They're around. Yes.
Like I invested into a few projects. I lost a shit ton of money, but hey,
yes.
Like you live and you learn, right?
They're not so much in the news for sure right now, but I mean, they are around.
It could change. Yeah, it could change. And again, I still believe in the technology. I think the technology is right. I just think maybe it was a little too early at the time, and people still didn't understand. But I could totally see how all that's going to be relevant in the future, especially how future generations are becoming more and more and more digital.
Lately, and more listening to some podcasts and watching some news, it's very strange that how people are more talking about public art versus street art, which at the end is the same thing. But everybody calls that public art. Of course, street art was for the publics, was for the masses, was for the street. So every interview now seems to be all about public art. Because things are more curated, I guess. And you just finished this past few months a huge project in Plantation and Central Park, actually with my son Maxence.
Yes,
with
his
yes. So that was a big project.
Oh,
so how do you tackle something like this?
So I mean, again, it goes to show you how experience is always key to certain things. Because I remember when I first started like going out of town and all that, and you start painting on different surfaces, you start learning about different techniques and things, how it works. I remember one time I did this piece there. It was my first time ever painting on brick. So what I did was I painted straight spray paint on brick. That was the worst mistake ever. I feel bad, but we're talking about, this was probably 2018, something like that, 2017 maybe, and like I was just painting on concrete that was already kind of primed, and the spray paint was holding well.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that brick was such a breathable thing. And then like I get an email like a year later, like, oh my God, the mural's like flaking off, and I'm like, ooh, sorry about that. Maybe put a clear coat over it, And then but now I make sure I go and I prep the surface, make sure I let the people know, like, make sure it's pressure washed. We got to put a nice primer on it, a sealant primer, seal the thing. Now we're talking. Now it's high quality stuff. That's a whole different thing. But tackling, especially working with the private sector and the public sector, it's almost two different things. When you're working in the public sector, you gotta really think about, and just in general, you gotta think about the community. And I think that's the most important part, because you have to remember that, the piece is more theirs than it'll ever be yours. Especially when you go and you travel. I'm basically going in there as like an interpreter, of what their world is, from an outsider's perspective. Here in Florida, it's much easier because I'm being Floridian, and I know what we can relate to, the colors and everything. I'm able to translate that much better. But it's cool, like we go and I have these sit downs. I'll never forget one time I had to sit down with a community. It was a tiny community in Tennessee, South Pittsburgh. And we had a virtual town hall where the people from town came and they told me what they're like, oh yeah, or Friday night football, cornbread festivals. So I made a piece that it was still true to me, but it tied in everything in their community, and that is what worked. I think that's what worked out the best.
All right. So you were talking about community and things like this. Growing up in your neighborhood in Hialeah. So this is going to bring us to the last part of the podcast, which is something you are the only artist that I know around here who has created with his high school scholarship. I mean, this is something very, very personal to you, very deep, very meaningful. And once again, this is for your community, your own community. So if you can tell us a little bit about this, Ivan Roque.
So it's the Roque Future Creators Fund is the name of the scholarship. When I graduated high school and decided to become an artist, the one thing I told myself is that one day I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna make a scholarship for kids that are just like me. Thankfully over the years and like the work I've gotten, I've been able to get to a point where I can go back. Last year I gave a $500 scholarship to the first recipient, and I remember because at first I'm like, oh, how much does a scholarship be? And then I remember I was talking to the advisors and teachers that have been at that school since I was there, and they're like, anything you give, like just the whole thing is, we just got just get it started. And I'm like, you're right. So I remember we whipped it up last year. I gave $500, and that to me was a very proud moment. And so this year I told myself I'm going to double it. And I gave $1,000, and I created a medal.
Yes, I saw that.
The Roque Medal of the Arts, and, it's a beautiful layer gold medallion with a black ribbon. My idea is for next year I want to be able, so first off, I need to actually make the fund into an actual non-for-profit. That's the plan. I want to be able to make a non-for-profit so I can do galas and I can get sponsors on board and I can grow this where I can give more than just one scholarship and maybe start expanding to other schools.
Exactly. Yeah. You would have to raise the money in order to give the money to some recipients and everything. I mean, because this is so generous, so giving to the people, giving back. I mean, this is absolutely incredible. So those two kids who graduated, Genesis and Christopher, yes. You knew them from the school. You followed them throughout the school year.
For Genesis, the school. So I already been telling them about my idea about doing the scholarship, and I didn't know how we're going to give it to, who we're going to give it to, and like what process. And so the school group reached out to me and said, "Oh, look, she just won an award to go show her art in the Congress representing the city and South Florida." And like I think, and she won an award out there, and she met with all these politicians and congressmen, and the work was beautiful. And she basically, so it was obvious. Okay, we're gonna give it to her. And then the following year, Christopher, he's actually been. I've met him when he was in 10th grade. It's crazy because like he's always interested in the work, and so he would reach out to me and ask me like for advice, and I would tell him like, oh, this is what you should do, and he would go to art shows, and he's already met a bunch of artists in the community, and he's already been doing work and actually. Kind of making a living as a muralist. He's been working on projects, and I taught him a little bit how to spray paint and all that. So to me, it was just like this kid's very deserving of this award this year. So that was a no brainer to give it to him. So I actually went to a career day to my high school because I'll go once a year to go talk to the kids, but usually the art kids and the AP art students. But then this time they invited me to a career fair where I got to talk to all the kids. So I met kids that were interested in fashion design, kids that weren't even into art, but I was able to inspire them to pursue their dreams, and I told them I'm just like them. I let them know, I was like, listen, I came from the same exact background as you guys, and if I did it, you can totally do it. Because I mean, I'll tell you, I was a shit student. I was not lucky to graduate, you know what I'm saying? But I had like a 2.7 GPA, which is not good, right?
No, it's not exactly good.
So, but we made it happen, you see what I mean? So, but I wanted to let them know that, it's possible, and I'm very honest with them, and I let them know, listen, whatever you need, you can reach out to me or any other artist, and, if you want us to critique your work, we will, I'll be brutally honest with you, to help make you better. And so some things that I also want to do is like, I want to keep on helping with the art programs especially at my old high school, I'm going to try to talk to a few people because I want to see if I can somehow get the AP art students I'm gonna try my best to get them like some type of museum pass, that allows them to go explore the museums and like, without at no cost. That way it opens their mind.
Exactly.
Because, when I was growing up, I didn't go to museums.
Yeah.
I didn't go to any art thing. I was just exposed to whatever was there at the time, so I can imagine, and I see such talent in these kids, that it's just, it really makes me really happy. And I'm also excited to see how the school has embraced the arts more now than ever. So, and
we know all the fundings in Florida and South Florida have been cut right and left. Teachers are left with absolutely nothing, not much of a supply to work with the children. It's terrible. Exactly. So if you want to give a shout out to the school, because I don't think you have mentioned the name of the school.
So my old high school, it's a Matter Academy charter, middle high, and they've been supportive since the beginning of my career, and like I said, like, we want to keep on growing the art program there, and like hopefully, it can be as great as Miami Design School or New World, things like that. So I mean, let's keep working on it,
And you also made a beautiful gift of a mural at the school with those lion, pride and everything. This is quite a...
Oh, that was striking. That right there, I mean, like, they tell me all the time, I went over there like, we got to keep the tourists away because, there's a hotel across the street and people will come and take pictures and all that. And they're like, we got to, it goes to show you, I want something to create the family aspect of it there.
Exactly. That's what I did.
Every time I go back, it just reminds me of like, it kind of is like one big family there, that we all grew up in.
The very last part of the podcast, and something I used to do in the interview, it's either to start the interview with a quote or finish in the podcast with a quote. And of course, since we talk about community and the different things, so the quote that I've chosen is from Mary Ann Radmacher. If you want to read it, then give me your thoughts about it.
As we work to create light for others, we naturally light our own way. Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that.
Yeah, I think this was a nice way to summarize everything that we talked about, from your art, from all the love that you put, your generosity side that you give to the community, to these children, to your scholarship. So finish on some words of wisdom.
Well, I mean, the only words of wisdom I have is that, just to keep on going, no matter what, to whoever is out there, especially the younger artists, artists that are just starting out, just know that every single time that you're about to quit, every single time life gets really difficult and you're thinking this is a sign to quit, that's when you have to push even harder, because that right there is just the universe testing you to make sure that you're worthy of the life that you deserve. Make sure you keep on pushing, because I can promise you this, there's gonna be bad days, but there's gonna be extremely amazing days on the other side of that. Keep pushing, and like you said there, keep lighting the way, and it'll light for yourself eventually.
I think it does too. And then learn from your mistake. If you do something,
1,000%.
Like you mentioned, those paintings that you admit that you were painting just to try to please the people, or whatever, just be true to yourself. Exactly. So this is a great way to live your own life. I mean, every day, and eventually write your own narrative.
Yeah, that's true, bro. That's true.
All right, so Ivan, thank you so much. Thank you for all these years. It's not just those few minutes that we spent together here today recording that podcast, but for all these years, all these different things that I've seen you, all these different occasions. It's something to me that knowing an artist, knowing someone from the outside world, loving his art or not, but then when you so generously share your family, your art, your studios and everything, so this is something even more meaningful to me.
Oh, thank you, brother. I'm glad.
Thank you so much again. No, this was absolutely memorable. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ivan, for sharing your incredible journey with us. Please follow and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. Have a great week, everyone, and I'll see you on the next episode of Write Your Narrative, a South Florida Street Art podcast.